Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Arsenal Pass. Today we have a deck tech, like a side deck tech with Matt Dilks here, calling champion Matthew Dilks. I was really impressed. I was actually watching, I was sitting behind Majin Bay that day when you won the calling because I had recently taken him to try to wake up. We'll say after the morning, he was having a bit of a rough time. So I watched from the Kano perspective, and I was particularly impressed with your play in the finals there. And I did notice there were some deck changes as well. The introduction of the chest that makes vigor tokens. It's much harder to play against, and I thought it was a fantastic addition. You and I were able to play in round one of the Pro Tour, which was really cool. Actually, I know some people really hate the team kill stuff, but I always find it to be a pleasure to be able to play against people that I recognize. So it was a great match. But I want to hit Kassai from a high level now that you took it to the Pro Tour. Maybe didn't have the results you were looking for, ran it back the next day, and then run it all the way to the finals, and you become calling champion Matthew Dilks. Very impressive run. So initially, what made you bring Kassai specifically to the PT?
Uh, I really enjoy the playstyle of Kassai. I played her a little bit in Blitz. I thought people kind of built her a little incorrectly in Blitz, and I was pretty excited to give her a shot in CC when we had the new adult hero. It's basically the only hero I played since the the set came out. I don't know. I just couldn't stop playing her.
Mm-hmm. How was Kasai's position in the metagame for the PT and still in the constructed meta pre-Dromai rotation? Where do you think she fits?
I thought going into the PT that basically her only bad matchup was Kano. Like at least for our version of the deck and our game plans that we had for Dromai. I think Dromai is also traditionally kind of not a great matchup, but I thought we had like a really solid game plan in Dromai going into the PT. So I was pretty happy with my position. I didn't think like Kano was going to be that highly represented, even though I got kind of nuked the first round. But yeah, I was pretty happy with her position. I think she has good matchup spread other than Kano Dromai.
How does Kasai differ from the other warriors that are showing up in the metagame right now, particularly Bolton, Dorinthia? Like, what makes Kasai unique?
It's definitely her specializations.
Mm-hmm.
Blood on her hands and Raisin Army. Uh, Going in like basically probably a week before, we actually built a deck basically just to be a Raisin Army deck, and I thought we gave up maybe a little too much into KO,
Mm-hmm.
so I had to kind of hedge back towards more of a copper game plan. But it's definitely her specializations that kind of put her uh, above the Warriors for me.
Mm-hmm. So you took Asai into a somewhat Dromai and Kano dominated field, but Dromai is very close to Living Legend. So as you look towards ProQuest, I can only assume that Kasai's stocks raise. How are you feeling about the deck post Dromai rotation?
Uh, I mean, I feel pretty good. I mean, other than you can maybe try to reallocate some of those Dromai slots for Kano. It's probably a fruitless effort, but uh, basically everything else, I feel very comfortable playing Kassai into. It's just very solid numbers deck, and you just get to go over the top with your specializations.
Mm-hmm. All right, and before we head into sort of the minutia of the deck, I want to hit some high level stuff here. Just first off, why no slice and dice in particular?
Uh, Basically, we found that our turns were already good if we had go again, so we didn't need cards like slice and dice to like. I mean, if you have go again, slice and dice is quite good. It's an above rate card, but if you already have go again, your turn's already good, so you don't really need cards like that.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't play Crown of Dominion in the Pro Tour, but has now since made it into your list. You also cut down from AB3 to AB2. Can you talk a little about some of those changes?
I mean, basically, I thought I was dead no matter what if I have AB3 or AB2. So I thought it was more value to have the Dominion. It's very good in all these grindy matchups. Victor, a Warrior Mirror, like you really want to play into the Raisin Army in those matchups, and just starting with a gold is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. And into Jamai, are there any other weapon additions that you could make if you were looking to overtech into Jamai and try to get a bit more edge, or is it just straight up.
I
With the
think
swords?
the hatchet, like cleave stuff doesn't actually help. Like, you primarily need to use copper and have giant blood on our hands turns against them to kind of recoup the value of losing the dragons. I don't think it actually swings the matchups in a valuable way when already our high popper and copper game plan I think works pretty well.
Yes, and finally, can you talk to me just a little bit about the use case of Hot Streak and how it fits into this list specifically?
Just extremely good anti-fatigue technology. It also just can put people into spots where they can give you free go again. Like if like a really good play is like Outland Skirmish, pitch blue, and attack with Hot Streak against like KO or any of these decks that have mostly attack actions. Like they're basically forced to give you a copper and a vigor token in that spot, or just give you go again and take another card or reset Dynamo. Like there's so many spots where Hot Streak just adds basically the consistency of how many go agains your deck has access to, and that's just always your choke point is your go again. Yeah, it just puts people in awkward spots where they're just giving you free go again. You can set up like Saber into Hot Streak into 6 attack. Those like very common game like play line, just popping off with Nourishing or CNC at the end of the combat chain.
Yeah, awesome. Well, with that, let's take a short break and then let's go and head into the specifics of the deck list and break it down. All right, now looking at the core deck list here, it looks like you have 52 cards in the main deck or the core. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that? Are these 52 cards that never get swapped out?
Pretty much. It's basically your core blues, go agains, and pump spells. And I think I don't really ever cut any of the 6 attacks in this current version of the list. So yeah, I would say this is pretty much the core 52 of the deck.
And just to hit it from a high level, what are some of the general play patterns of the deck? Can you just run me through a few just good sequences, good hands that you're looking for when playing Kassai?
Block with 2 cards, attack with your saber, give it go again with Blade Runner, and then attack with the second saber.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard this one before. So in terms of ratios, like what are the ratios you're working with right now, and like, are you very comfortable with them? The amount of blues, yellows, and reds that you have in the deck list.
I feel like it's maybe a little greedy on blues right now, but the total yellow count is pretty important when you fat deck into the grinding matchups. But I think the yellows is all the way up to like almost 20 yellows or something like that right now, which is maybe like slightly high, but I think all the yellows warrant their spot in the current metagame. A lot of them are poppers, so I think I'm pretty happy with the current ratios. Maybe a little too light on blues and slightly high on yellows, but I think it's actually a good spot to have a lot of yellows to banish a lot.
Are there any card choices in this main deck that you have in your Kassai list that might be different from other popular Kassai lists?
I think Stroke of Foresight is somewhat unpopular. It's definitely a reasonable attack reaction, so there's probably other people playing with it, but Stroke to me is like pretty much a 0 cost react because you end up getting reprised most of the time because you're forcing in a hit effect, either making gold or copper, and the reprise discounts the second swing on the sword. So you end up actually functionally a 0 cost pump in this situation. And I think it's probably one of the best attack reactions outside of Blade Flurry because you just can always get to play it. We're in the swing, and I'm blanking on the reprise one right now. Iron Song Response. You don't always get to play them, and that could be a huge detriment when people just like decide to race you. I think Hold the Line is probably a technology a lot of people maybe or maybe not got to as just like tech against KO. Like it's just so good against the brutes just to block for 5 and in a lot of the older Kassai lists, they would be playing cash in, and that would just be an insane blowout on their cash in turn if you end up blocking for 5 with 1 card. But for the most part, I think it's pretty kind of standard stuff.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned sort of the ideal play pattern of blocking with 2 cards, giving your sword go again. How does that change into some of the more attrition-based matchups or grindy matchups? Like, what is your strategy?
I'm trying to save my banishes and my attack reactions and trying to have big turns to force my copper and gold play, mostly the gold. Often, Spoils War is just kind of bait for later when you actually get to force gold, because it's all about raising an army in the end game.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how you take over and completely swing the matchup in your favor. You just make an army for like 3+ sellswords, and most of these decks, I mean, they're going to take multiple turns trying to clear it.
Do you have any tips and tricks and maybe play patterns that might not be immediately apparent with this list? Some sort of key lessons learned or takeaways you have in regards to like easy level ups with the Kassai that might not be immediately apparent when first picking up the deck or just looking at the list?
I think Outland Skirmish Hot Streak was a good example. Like basically utilizing Hot Streak in interesting ways, setting it up so you're always getting like 3 attacks with a Nourishing Emptiness or CNC at the end of the combat chain in huge spots. Like that's like number one. If you can put your opponent in spots where that happens, it's so powerful. So even them giving you free go again, or Glint of the Quicksilver, getting go again, hit and run, any of the free cost go again, setting up these 3 attack combat chains are pretty insane turns for this deck.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, with that, let's take a quick glance at the sideboard here. Let's just hit it from a high level. So you have the six defense reactions here. Just talk to me, or actually, I guess I can kind of call it 9 there because we have to take it on the chin as well. Talk to me about the use case of those and how it changes the core strategy of your deck. We also have 12. I guess we have 12. We have that all you got.
12.
Well.
That all you got as well. I mean, I think I tend to build this deck very, very, very defensively.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to extend the game, get more value out of my Valiant Dynamo, and in just long games for Flesh and Blood that wins games. Just more value over a long period of time. That all you got is just a very strong yellow. Like you just blocks for 3, sometimes draws cards in the mirror, ninja, various spots like that. It's like really powerful. And Sinking Fate are some of my favorite cards of the game. They're so powerful. Like just blocking for 4 just gives you so much agency over anything your opponent's trying to do to you.
Mm-hmm.
And Take on a Chin it's kind of a divisive card. It's a little clunky as functionally a 2 block, but when you draw exactly like 1 per hand and that's your go again, like that, the math is like very close to Red Blade Runner. Like it's very good.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight something you said because although it's kind of obvious when including this card in the deck, I do think it's really important to highlight that getting value off of Valiant Dynamo is critical to the deck's core strategy, which I guess is ubiquitous across a lot of warriors right now, but just such a powerful piece of armor that you need to be thinking about and be utilizing as much as possible. The Agile Windups, Fandol's Fighting Spirits, I'm assuming these are both for Dromai?
Both for Dromai, and are also add to your yellow count when you fat deck as well. Agile Windup is just 6 power that also can give you go again. Like I said before, like your choke point it usually is like how many go agains you have in your deck. So just any additional go agains is pretty much welcomed. It just checks like a lot of boxes. And then Fighting Spirit is kind of a popper that's also like sometimes a 3 block in not Dromai matchups, and also the gain of life clause against Dromai. Like if you pop a dragon and gain a life, like that's insane value as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just kind of the next best yellow 6 power probably.
Yeah, and when you say fat deck, just to sort of clarify on that, do you actually mean playing the 74 cards? Are you adding in all 22 of these cards into your deck?
Yeah, in a lot of the grindier matchups like Guardian and warrior where you expect like games to go to fatigue, often you shuffle everything up and and just block a lot and just try to have a long game, raise an army.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, I kind of want to hit on this Crown of Dominion. What is the like? So where were you at when you decided to not include it in your deck list? I mean, we kind of touched on it, but then sort of like post inclusion, like how has it changed sort of your strategy, or is it just like very, very good into those more attrition based matchups?
Yeah, so the deck is quite tight on slots
Mm-hmm.
because of how many poppers we have to play for Dromai. But basically a week before the PT, like I mentioned before, we were trying to kind of like going back and fact checking our matchups, and KO got a lot better. Like we were dominating KO in those first iterations of the deck, but the deck just got way more refined, and I got kind of scared that matchup was going to be too bad, and so Balance of Justice came in because I was actually Dominion into every matchup.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought Balance of Justice was really important against the Brutes. But Dominion is just very powerful in any of these kind of slower matchups where you're expecting to raise an army, because just the starting with basically a sellsword, because unless something's going very badly, I do not want to pop gold in those matchups for just discounting my sword swings. I want to make a 3-2 out of it. So yeah, the Dominion is just very strong, starting with a gold.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because you said a lot of these slots are devoted to Dromai, so as Dromai rotates, it will open up a lot of room in the deck. And being one of Kassai's worst matchups is a particularly interesting metagame for her. For people listening, because, I mean, you mentioned that you may have gotten a bit unlucky in both Pro Tour and the Calling with some of your Kano matchups. I mean, you just faced a lot of Kanos. What are, like, some of your strategies against Kano? Are you strategically holding back, taking on the chins? Are you parsing out your blues in a specific way? Are you sending as much damage as possible? Like, what's your general strategy into Kano as Kassai?
I would say I'm lucky enough to have gone to wizarding school for a few years, so I kind of, on a fundamental level, know how Kano works. So whether I'm holding, taking on chins, or using them, it kind of depends. Because Aether Spindle maybe is kind of the one that I would end up using it on early, and that is so dependent on situation that it's hard to explain like when you would use it or when you wouldn't. So it's just kind of depends where you are in the game and where if you think you're in a spot where like them opting 5 cards would actually end up killing you, or if you need the go again, like you might fire it off early. But yeah, ultimately I want to Arsenal take on the chin and use it on a wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, honestly, this deck is not built to put the kind of pressure you need to put on Kano to win. But you know, sometimes you draw all your Blade Flurries in the first like 2 turn cycles, and you put on enough pressure to win. It's one of the matchups that would really benefit from more attack reactions. But again, I don't know if that's like a fruitless effort anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also one of those decks that probably increases its popularity as Dromai fades out here. One question I have is just on Take to the Chin specifically because it's particularly interesting to me. So if you were playing against Kano, I'm sorry to sort of digress into Kano talk here, and you draw Take It on Chin very, very early, say something like turn 1, and it's just clearly your Arsenal card. Would you sit on that for, like, let's say there was no Spindle? Would you sit on that the entire game, saving it for Aether Wildfire, or would you fire it off for value if you potentially drew another? Or, like, I'm just wondering, like, the opportunity cost of not having the Arsenal and having the sort of anti-Wildfire card in the Arsenal. Is there any point in the game where it's like maybe it's too early to put it in there?
Yeah, it would definitely depend on the card that you're using it on. Like Aether Spindle is probably the biggest one, but then secondary probably Lesson in Lava. And it would also depend on the context of your own hand. If like you didn't have Go Again, and I felt like it was a spot where the Kano was maybe trying to set up a lesson to find a wildfire to then arsenal it, like maybe I'd fire it off there, try to like delay them setting up, and then still having Go Again to apply pressure on my turn. But it's just like very situational. I think Lesson in Lava, Aether, Spindle, and not really swell tidings. Like sometimes you want to deny the ponder. It kind of depends what the Kano has an arsenal, but there's a lot of like crappy blues that they could just easily draw off that thing. So usually you deny the ponder, but probably situationally you might not. But it's definitely Spindle and Lesson Lava, probably off the top of my head, are the biggest ones that you'd consider chinning early.
Yeah, so the reason why I ask in particular is because there was a moment in your match against Majin Bay in the finals of the Calling where you had a card in Arsenal that very much looked to be a take it on the chin. It was actually a blue overpower, I believe, which was quite surprising. But so yeah, it's always super interesting to me about like when you put in the Arsenal, like the opportunity cost of having the Arsenal, and what are reasonable targets actually fired off on. But yeah, great stuff. I think Kassai was in a great position for the Pro Tour, even though it might not have been the most popular warrior. I expected it to be the most popular warrior. I thought it was going to be a third most played deck. Ended up being Dorinthia. Nevertheless, seems to be in a great position. I mean, I think he really showed off the power level of the deck, taking it to a constructed only tournament the next day in the Calling and running it all the way to become a Calling champion. And it only gets better with Dromai. Is there any like... I know it's kind of a whole nother topic of how the deck changes once Dromai comes in, leaves the metagame. But are there any like immediate additions that you know that you're gonna bring into the deck as Dromai rotates?
Yeah, I think the yellow fighting spirits are probably a little overkill, even though I kind of like the yellow count how it is. It's probably the most difficult part of balancing this deck is finding worthwhile yellows to put into the deck. But I would definitely it really depends on how the format shakes out, but I expect like a lot of like the more grindy decks to rise up, like Dorinthia or Victor, and I would really like to increase the attack reaction count in the swing and stroke of foresight, the ones I've already chosen. I only play 2 of each right now, and those would be one of the easiest place that I would add or reallocate those 3 slots would be 2 more red attack reactions and then the 3rd Raisin army. Other than that, I think I want to try Spell Void, but I don't know if it's going to be helpful. But yeah, more attack reactions to help you push gold is like the first place I'm going to start with reallocating some of these slots, because I think Agile Windup is still a reasonable card into a lot of those matchups. Like just like again, like Go Again is your ultimate spot where you just need to have it every turn, and then it's still like you want to have some poppers for Prism, even though I think it's way less important than Dromai.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you for coming on the channel and doing this Kassai Deck Tech, and I also want to say congratulations on becoming a Calling champion. It was cool to see you sort of carry the banner all the way to the finals. I know everybody was super excited when you were able to win that tournament. I mean, just a huge congratulations. That's one of the, in my opinion, it's one of the hardest tournaments to win. Those the sort of day 2 Pro Tour World Championship callings where you get sort of all these players that decided to drop day 2, and now you have this like mega competitive constructed calling that has sometimes a ton of players. So huge achievement there. And I know we're all super happy for you that we're a part of that testing group. I want to give you a chance to shout out where people can find you. If you're interested in that, anything you're up to, just
you can find me nowhere. My Twitter DMs I think are disabled. But I am on Twitter. It's just my name at Matt Dilks. I tweet sometimes. I was running a bit for a long time where I would just tweet GIFs, but I don't really do that anymore. But yeah, the Arsenal Pass boys, you know, they kind of I only do it for them. I do content for them.
Kind of expected that, but yeah. Anyway, appreciate you coming on. I want to mention for anybody watching this, if you're interested to go a little bit deeper on this deck, if you want the sideboard guide, extra tips for each matchup. So we have like Dromai, Victor, Brute, everything you need. We do have an additional written piece on Patreon, so you can check that out. Again, big thank you to Matt Dilks for coming on. Huge congratulations for becoming a Calling champion. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this deck tech. We'll see you all in the next video.